Are you making these mistakes in your grant proposal? In today's video, I'm going to break down the number one reason most people don't get funded and how to fix that. If this is your first time watching, I am Trina Boy. I am the founder of a nonprofit called Women in Power, where I help women in business with coming out of their 9 to 5 through starting their business, scaling, getting funding for their business. And this video is going to be geared particularly towards women who have a for-profit business, and I'm going to touch on some nonprofit information that's going to help you with getting funded. All right. Before I get into that, though, I do want to say that my book is finally out, and the link will be in the description. Also, I will have a free checklist for you if you're looking to do grant writing. I will have a free checklist in the description. And also, if you're watching this in what's this month? April 2025, I just want to let you know that membership is open for Women in Power. If you may or may not know that we are a national nonprofit, so most of our stuff and all our meetings are virtual, and we meet once a month, which includes group coaching that's tailored towards your business. You also get some other good stuff. But I also want to say that this Friday, if you're watching this right now, this Friday we will have a membership entrance meeting, which is virtual, and it's going to be at 12:15 Eastern time. All right. So what is the mistake that you could possibly be making that is not allowing you to get funding for your business? So with all of the research, statistics, and studies shows that when you are applying for these applications, and this is also from experience, and also some of this information is going to come from one of this young lady. She actually spoke with the members of Women in Power, in which I agree with her. But some of this information is going to come from some of that information that she gave us in the class, and also from experience of me winning grants as well. All right, and like I said, it's going to be for if you have a for-profit or a nonprofit. Make sure you comment in the comments the name of your for-profit or your nonprofit. So one of the mistakes that you could be making if you are a for-profit is going to be not telling your story. So you definitely want to get a story about why you started your business, right? That's the number one reason. They want to know, why did you start your business? So for example, if I was going to put in a grant application, a lot of times they're going to have the instructions on what they're looking for. But also at the end of that grant application, they're going to ask you for your story. One of the most frequent application that a lot of people know about or may have heard about is called Hello Alice. They always ask you about your story. So you want to master your story when you're submitting that grant applications over to them, but any of them. A lot of times the grant application is going to be geared towards your story. What are you doing in the community? But you definitely want to tell them, why did you start your for-profit or your nonprofit? So for the for-profit piece, when you go to helloalice.com, that is going to be for the for-profits. If you have a nonprofit, it's going to be your mission. So your mission statement will include your story as well. But if you are a for-profit, master your story. One of the things that I teach as a member of Women in Power is how to master your story, also how to use AI to master that story, and also how to use your tone, because if you're using your tone and not the computer's tone, it's going to sound more authentic, right? So one of the things that I teach as a member of Women in Power is how to master your tone, how to master your story. And you want to just have that story on a Google Doc or somewhere where you can just copy and paste from grant application to grant application. But before I get into that, I also want to say, make sure you're changing up that story, like 1 or 2 sentences, so it won't be plagiarism, right? Because when you're using the same, you can use the same story, but if it's word from word, then that's where you can get in trouble. So you want to make sure that you are changing up, even if it's a one word. It's not the exact, thing. But master your story when you are submitting these grant applications. Tip number 2, you want to show impact, right? Especially for nonprofits. I'm going to emphasize that, because nonprofits, they want to see impact. They want to see, what are you already doing? You may be a new nonprofit that's probably do not have any impact. You may have a little impact. One of the things that I have learned when I'm coaching women on in their nonprofit and they want to say, hey, I want to show impact, I need to show impact in this grant because that's what I teach, is that I know you are probably already doing something in the community that you may not even think about, because you probably was doing something in the community before you even got your 501c3. I do want to say, if you need help with your 501c3, make sure you comment below. I have a course on how to get your 501c3. I have helped hundreds of women with getting their 501c3. But the number one thing that you're going to need when you are applying for grants as a nonprofit, you're definitely going to need your 501c3 letter, especially if you are doing things within the community and trying to get funding and trying to get grants. If you are not a nonprofit, you don't have to be a nonprofit to get grants. But if you're not a nonprofit, you still want to show some type of impact. And so one of the things that I have always seen on Hello Alice's application is that they always ask you, what are you doing in the community? So they're asking you, what's your story? And then also, what are you doing in the community? And I'm like, why does that matter, right? It matters to them. It matters that you are doing something in the community. So you want to make sure, if you are a for-profit business, which means you are probably an LLC, a S Corp, a C Corp, or a sole prop, you want to make sure that you have something that you can put in that number where they're asking you, what are you doing in the community? You want to be able to say, what are you doing in the community? Also, I teach women how they can use AI to put that, because a lot of times, one of the things that I'm learning with the women that I'm coaching is that they don't know how to word their grant. They're afraid of grammar errors and making mistakes in writing, right? We all are. So one of the things that's going to help minimize any errors in your grant application is using AI. That's one of the main reasons that we're using AI, to help minimize grammar, because you probably already know what you're going to say, right? So because you already know what you want to say, now we need AI to say, hey, we need you to write this in our tone and then remove any grammar errors or anything like that. So that's the purpose of using AI. And then another reason that we use AI is to come up with some type of ideas. AI is really good for researching and trying to figure out anything when you're doing researching, but you definitely want to use AI, especially if you feel like you're not a good writer. You want to use AI, and then you also want to use it in your tone, so that way it does not sound like a robot. So that's the tip I will give you. Going back to the nonprofit thing, I do want to say, and you all, if this is not your first time watching, you know I am really big on having a website. Yes, you got to have some type of digital footprint, because guess what? When you're submitting these applications, you are submitting them online on a digital platform. So how else will they know who you are, right? On your website. So you have to have a website. If you don't have a website, I actually do not apply for any grants. Do not. Because how are they going to know if you're legitimate? Because they're not going to go to your Secretary of State and say, hey, to the website and see if you're a legitimate business. They're going to go to your actual website. That's the way they can see pictures. So if you are a nonprofit or a for-profit, you want to have a website, but you also want to be taking pictures of the things that you are doing in the community. If you are a for-profit, you still want to take pictures. You want to have a tab on your website about your impact. You want to have an about tab about your story. That's where your story is going to go. These are some of the mistakes that could be killing your grant. So make sure that you are including you having a website. Make sure you're mastering your story. Making sure that these things are in place, so that way you can win these grants. Another thing I want to say, if you are applying, I would encourage you to apply on a local level. There is funding, especially if you are in a rural area. Even if you're not in a rural area means that you're in like the country. That's how we talk. The country, which means there's not a lot of people there. It may be like a smaller population. That's where they want to give the money out to. The people in those smaller towns, but also in bigger towns like Charlotte or Houston, Texas, those particular areas, they also have money set aside for you, that are coming for foundations for your for-profit and your nonprofit. Another thing that could be killing your application is also not having what? A budget. This is for your nonprofit. So a lot of times I run into nonprofits, they're not ready to apply for grants. They're just not, because they don't have a website. The number one thing is having a operating budget. What is an operating budget? Your operating budget is coming off of, for example, like your overhead. So what is your budget for paying yourself? Because a lot of people don't know that just because you're a nonprofit, you're not supposed to get a salary, but you're doing work for free, right? If you don't get a salary, you're doing work for free. But if you're not a fully funded nonprofit, you may not be able to pay yourself, but it still can go in your budget, right? So when you say budget, so like people say, what's your budget? My budget is this. This is what I could pay for this particular event or whatever. That's your budget, right? But sometimes, a lot of times, you may not have that budget. You may not have the funding within that budget, but you still have a budget. So you need to budget out in your, as a nonprofit, you need to have a budget for the different programs. What you want to do as a nonprofit is figure out what are your programs, because anytime you're going to apply for these grants, it's for something. It may be for an operating budget, right? Because I've seen grant applications that are just for funding for operating expenses. I've seen those grants for your nonprofit, right? So with that being said, you want to have an operating budget that includes the sections for salary, that includes the sections for your programs, that includes the section for supplies, overhead, all of those things. You need to have a overall operating budget, right? And then you also want to have program budgets. What is a pro? These are two different type of budgets that I'm talking about, right? If you have a nonprofit, these are two different types of budgets that I'm talking about. So what is a program budget? A program budget is going to be for that particular program. So for example, for me, one of my programs is going to be the business credit program. So that's where we help women with business credit, getting funding for business credit. One of the number one things that African American, not just women, but African Americans struggle with is funding. So I have a program out, that's one of my programs within the nonprofits, which is Women in Power. I have more than one program. You can have more than one program. So for example, when someone starts telling me what they do, I start telling them what their programs could possibly be. So for example, someone to say, hey, this is what I do. I help the homeless. We help feed them. We help with housing. We help with paying bills. These are like the things that they do. So what could their programs be? If you can come put in the comment off of what I just said, what you could think their programs could be. As you're typing that, I'm going to tell you what the programs could be. If they say they're helping the homeless with feeding, they're helping with housing, they're helping them with paying their bills or whatever, people who maybe need help with paying bills or whatever. One program could be a feeding program. We know Second Harvest is a food bank, right? So that's their main program. They may have other programs they do within, their nonprofit, but if they're telling me these are all the things they're doing, now we have a program. Their program is a feeding program, and they can focus on grants just for the feeding program. And there are a lot of grants just for feeding people. That's the actual program, right? So another program, if they're telling me they're feeding them, they're housing them, they're giving them money for bills, the second program can be a housing program, right? The housing program can help with finding housing, or housing them, right? If you are a savvy entrepreneur or a savvy founder, then you want to find you want to purchase housing through the USDA loan where you have 0% interest, which is incredible, right? Of course, you have to be a nonprofit, but that's what a savvy entrepreneur would do. You would purchase, look for an apartment building, and you want to house those people under your nonprofit. What is that going to do when you go and purchase a building under your nonprofit for a housing program? What is that going to do for your nonprofit? Think about it. What is that going to do for your nonprofit? Because one of the things we understand, that's real estate, right? Even if you are a nonprofit and you have an actual building under your nonprofit, but if you are serving people through Section 8, you're still receiving revenue under your nonprofit. But what is that going to do? That is going to explode your nonprofit. That's going to explode it. Because not only are you receiving revenue from the housing that you have purchased, because we know it's a need all over the United States for housing, for affordable housing. I want to say affordable housing, where the government will fund and give you money as your nonprofit. If that's one of your programs, which is housing, they will give you money per unit. Here in Charlotte, it's anywhere from $900 to $2,400 a month. So if you have let's just say you have 50 units, it doesn't have to be a lot of units. Let's just say you have 50 units, right? Or 50 apartment buildings that you purchase under your nonprofits program through the USDA at 0% interest. So you're not even paying any interest, right? Let's just say you do this, right? And you have 50 units under your nonprofits, and you're charging the rates. Let's just say the average rate is going to be, let's say, $1,300. Let's just say $1,000 to make the math easy. $1,000 per apartment building, and not only are you helping, you're helping with affordable housing in your city, right? So with that being said, let's just say you're charging $1,000 to the government. This is guaranteed money. Remember that this is guaranteed. This is guaranteed money coming to your nonprofit if you have a housing program. A $1,000 per unit, this is an average. It could be more or a little bit less, and you have 50 units under your nonprofit. How much is that? Type into the chat, how much is that? If you're keeping up with what's going on, type into the chat, how much is that coming to your nonprofit every single month? Every month, because you're charging the government, because this is affordable housing. So that means the person they need housing. Not only are you helping, but they're needing housing, but also the government is going to guarantee that you get that money every single month. They may pay a little bit. I know some people who are on Section 8, they pay like maybe a couple $100, $50, or none at all, right? So with that being said, you're getting $1,000 per month, per unit. How much is that? And it's guaranteed money. Type into the chat, how much is that per month? That is $50,000 per month. Times 12, put it in the chat. How much is that? So this is what, $600,000 coming to you every single month, outside of however much you're paying, for the mortgage on the apartment unit, which is probably not that much, right? With that being said, that's $600,000 of guaranteed money of you being able to help other people with affordable housing under one of your programs, right? So this is incredible. So these are the type of opportunities that you can use for your nonprofits outside of even grant funding, right? So these are the type of opportunities that will allow you to scale your nonprofit to where you can be able to have an operating budget, to be able to pay your staff, to be able to pay yourself as the founder, to be able to, cover overhead for your nonprofit. But I just wanted to encourage you all so you can see that that's possible. But then just having that budget is going to be important, and knowing. But this is another reason you may want to have a coach. You want to have a coach to be able to walk you through these things in your nonprofit and your for-profit, because some people don't think, oh, I can do, I can get a building or I can get an apartment unit for my nonprofit to be able to house people who need this, and I can get it as a zero entrance to the USDA, right? A lot of people don't know about these programs, right? But these are some of the things that I talk about as a member of my nonprofit organization. I talk about, and you get coaching with me. You get private coaching every single month with me. You have to schedule it yourself. You'll have the link to schedule that time with me, but you get it every single month. And then you also get group coaching. All right. So these are some of the mistakes you could be making. Another thing I have learned as when I'm talking to women and coaching women as a for-profit. Now let's get on the for-profit side. Some of the things I have learned on the for-profit side with women, that they could be suffering from generating revenue. And they just say, oh, I need a grant. I need a grant. You may need a grant, if you, depending on what type of service that you're providing, you may need a grant, but you also may need a coach that can coach you to 6 to 7 figures as well. They can give you those resources, because one of the things that you're going to need is resource. You need to, knowledge is power. The Bible says that my people perish because of lack of knowledge. You have to have knowledge. It's one of the reasons I do so much research on things for whatever I'm needing. I research. But these are some of the things that could be killing your grant and your business and your revenue. And also, before I let y'all go, another thing is not knowing your numbers. What are numbers? Somebody asked me that before on a call, on a Instagram live. What do you mean? What are your numbers? Like, what are you going to be making? What are you charging people? Right? It's okay to get a grant. It's okay to apply for these grants and take these tips. But you also want to know, what do you charge, especially if you are a brand new business. And these are some of the things I can help you with as a member of our organization. So make sure you apply to become a member. You do have to apply. And then also make sure you are attend this Friday, our membership entrance meeting. So just to kind of recap what we have talked about is some of the things that could be killing your application for a grant application for your for-profit business and your nonprofit business is not telling your story. If you are a for-profit, the story is going to go on the actual application. I can teach you how to use AI to get that story, craft that story as with your voice and your tone. If you are a nonprofit, your story goes into your mission statement, and it's certain things that has to go into your mission statement that you need to include in your mission statement. One of them is going to be your story. The whole mission statement is not about your story, but you need to include something about your story because it's something that made you want to start your nonprofit, right? Also, you need to show impact. Even as a for-profit, you need to show, what are you doing in the community? We need to craft and master that. So when you go on to apply for that grant application as a for-profit, they'll know what you're doing in the community, which will help you also remove, AI is going to help you remove those grammar errors. Also, third thing we talked about was website. Let's get a website, y'all. If you need help with those things or resources on how to get a website, or just being able, if you don't have a lot of money to even, pay somebody to do a website, you can do your own website. That's what I did when I first started. I did my own website and generated 6 figures just off my website that I created. It's all about knowing and being led by the Holy Spirit. That's how you know it's being led on automations and all those good things. But I want to encourage you all to take these tips, take notes. Also, like I said, my book is out. The link will be in the description about grant writing it's called the Grant Writing Playbook. You only can get it at my website, not on Amazon, y'all. But you can get it at my website, which will be at the bottom in the description. Also, the membership link, if you want to find out more information about membership, meet me on Friday at 12:15 Eastern time. We may have some evening times, but the link will be in the description as well. Also, I will include the checklist for you if you need a checklist for your, if you're writing a grant. I will include a free checklist in the description for you. Thank you for watching, and make sure if you enjoyed this information, make sure you are subscribed to this channel for more videos.